Alright, this is a Modern Voices episode. Today we are going to be discussing our general impressions of a con that we went to. And for those of you who are not aware of it, a con stands for two things: a convict, which we are not talking about, and a convention. This is basically where a lot of people of like-minded entertainment desires get together, dress up. Usually there's some dress up. And just
called cosplay.
Kind of hang out. The one we went to is Anomalycon in downtown Denver, Colorado. It is a steampunk themed convention, and neither one of us is really a big fan of steampunk, but we were visiting Denver, Colorado. They had it. We decided to go, and it was the first convention we've been to. It was not quite what I was expecting, to be honest.
So first of all, it was not a huge convention. Should be on record on that. It was, instead, a lot of times these cons you hear about, like San Diego Comic-Con or the Comic-Con in Dallas, they're huge at the big towns convention center. This was not at the big convention center. It was at a hotel that had convention center type stuff to it, with floors that actually had like rooms where you could host sites and stuff like that. But it was a hotel and convention center, not at the big city version of the convention center, which usually those are just massive. So, on scale, it was one of the smaller cons you could go to, I would say.
Well, we went on the first day of it, and I would estimate it was somewhere in the 1,000 to 5,000 people range, and that's probably being generous.
Yeah, I mean, that night, probably not that much, but over the weekend, you're probably going to get about that many people, I think.
And that's kind of the general side. These oddball cons, I was talking to my son, and he kind of said, the oddball cons, the ones that aren't really mainstream, that's really about the size that he would expect to see, because he's into anime, and the first year he went to an anime con in Dallas, that was roughly the size of the anime con. But
yeah,
anime became more mainstream, and the convention blew up while during the couple of years he went. So steampunk is not really mainstream yet, but these people don't do it because it's mainstream. They do it because they find it fun. And I was actually surprised. I will say this: I bet you the reason so many of the participants were dressed up is because it is one of the more niche cons.
I get it falls into that. Certainly, it falls into. We went on the very first day, on a Friday afternoon. You're not going to get as many of those drop-ins like us. I thought it was a reasonable price. There's a $20 fee to get in, just for a single day. So most of the people that were there were the registrants who had registered for all 3 days worth of the con, and so yeah, they were like those of us who weren't dressed up were the significant minority.
Yeah.
Of the group, which I think is probably wasn't going to be the case on Friday. I would imagine there would be a lot more people that would be there that wouldn't be in the cosplay type of thing, but still interested in going to the con. Or maybe cosplay light, instead of, because the people we saw at there when we were there, they were dressed to the hilt pretty much across the board. There weren't very many of them were in like sort of a costume. They were all in full gear.
Honestly, I saw the whole gambit. The ones that really stood out are the ones that are head to toe committed to their theme of their costume. But there were a couple of guys that were, slapping on a shirt and a belt and maybe having like a plastic gun, and that was their costume. It was a costume anybody could throw together in a couple of days preparation. They didn't stand out to me. But the ones that were costume experts, I guess you would say, those you visually saw those more because the presentation of their costume was so much better. You just kind of glanced over I really wouldn't say half-assed, just the more subdued costumes.
Yeah. So at a convention, we haven't gone to the first one. I kind of knew because I go to math conventions. It's somewhat how it works. But I thought this was fairly well run. They had lots of little booths set up for you to look at people's books, because steampunk is basically, it's kind of a more of a genre of novels, and some comics is where it's at. So you could, they had lots of booths set up with different authors and their books for you to pick up. They also had lots of interesting art. I thought was interesting that they had that setup was very nice. They also had the vendor area, which that's always for cons I've heard from other people. That's always one of the more interesting places to go. Is you go in the big vendor area where all the vendors actually set up their official stuff. I thought about getting a hat. It was a lot of my price range.
Yeah.
But it was a really nice hat. It was quality, handmade, and really, if I wore hats more, which I should get into, it actually probably wasn't overly priced for the quality of hat it was. It was real leather, Jason. So it was true.
I've talked to some people who buy Stetsons and buy those, I wouldn't really say designer cowboy hats, but they buy the name cowboy hats that are designed to last 5 to 10 years. And yeah, that hat was expensive, but I'd put it in the same market as one of those kind of hats.
Yeah,
It's not something I'm going to buy, because you can buy something without a name that's the same quality somewhere else.
Well, I know. I mean, these types of hats, I've gone in other hat stores at various times and looked for that quality of hat, a full-on leather hat that fit that quality. That's about how much it costs. It was about $150, and that was about how much that quality of a hat that's handmade costs. It's not on a production line type of hat. That's why it costs a little bit more than a hat that's made like in a kind of a production line system. But the other thing is that these events you go to, the costumes that you could definitely embellish on your costuming plan within that kind of thing. I thought that was very interesting. I think personally that if you have a con in your town and you have a free afternoon, that
it's good entertainment.
If it's at the price range that was at $20, it's a good couple hours to have fun with your kids or whatever. You go there. Typically, at least at this con we went to, but I think at most cons, the people that attend are fairly polite. They're not. There's always the occasional annoying person, but for the most part, they're there to have fun and do stuff. So they're not going to be.
Well, they're going to be annoying if you're annoying to begin with.
Right. If you're just there, just having a little time, your kids can usually find some stuff to do that might be kind of fun.
They have some of the vendors. It's very carnival-like in the fact that you can get pictures. There's artists that will draw characters of you. I'm quite sure if we'd gone to all the different panel shows, that's the one thing about a con, is if you're interested in the panel shows, the con will be much better. And
if you're really into the genre that you're talking about, whatever the con involves, that's the other thing they want to talk about. What they do for convention is they have all these, he calls them panel shows. They're not, I don't know if show is the right word. They have, you go to a little room and you have a panel discussion. And you note about these at at San Diego Comic-Con, where you have like a group of people in the front and they talk about their book, and they also, this one they had lots of the panels were about writing.
I will just kind of interject here. We went to a small con where you did not have to pre-register for the panel discussions. The bigger Comic-Cons,
there are some you have to register for, and most of them, though, you just stand in line to get into the one you want to get into. You have to be going to attending the con, and then you just stand in line.
Yeah.
And first come, first serve.
But there are some you pre-register, and if you don't pre-register and pay an extra fee, you don't get in.
There are a few of them like that. I think that's only at the really, really big ones that you have a few marquee events. All the rest of them are really just, there may be 80 seats in the room that it's in. When those 80 seats are full, you can actually still go in and stand if you want to, if it's a really interesting discussion. But most of the cons, you see it like if you're ever watching these shows or anything like that, people are standing in line to go into the panel that they want to see. Or talk about. This thing we went to was much smaller. That was not a problem for any of them.
I think at this point, I do need to interject, since we haven't been to a bigger con, I'm not positive that this is how it works.
Yeah, that's true. Bigger cons are different, but there is enough information on them because I've thought about going to the San Diego Comic-Con multiple times, and I have looked at stuff, and yes, there are a couple, but there's not as many of the. There are big important things like the Joss Whedon Avengers thing. you stand in line to get into it. You don't pre-register to get into that one. You just have to get there and stand in line. And you might stand in line for like 8 hours. Just like if you're camping out for like to be the first person in the theater to watch a show.
For people like me, nothing is worth standing in line for 8 hours to hear some person talk about something. I'm sorry, it's
right, and that's it. That's why one of the
it.
reasons why you haven't gone to very many people who go to conventions or do this kind of thing. They're very much into this stuff, which I think is neat. I mean, if it's your thing, I love the fact that these conventions happen. I think they're great.